Hello and welcome to Ugh. My tongue is dead. Let's try that again. Hello everyone, welcome to Midweek Gaming. I'm Nick on the side of the comments, of course, Justin providing audio commentary and his own brand of madness where applicable. I have to get that
Yes.
one sent back to the shops and redo that intro one day, but that'll be a later problem. So, speaking of being sent back to the shops, EA just sent another game back to the shops. Let's all clap for the obvious people. EA screws up something else. We all take a moment
Yippee!
of we all take a moment of collective just
Sigh.
exasperation. Let it out.
Unhappy. We are depressed.
Honestly. Honestly, and you know what? This is actually an interesting game too. Now, if you haven't heard, the news has been making the rounds over the last few days, but if you haven't, let me break it to you. So basically, there was a Black Panther game in the works, which would have actually been really interesting. I really liked the Black Panther character ever since the movies. Pity what happened to the guy who played the original Black Panther there, but that's neither here nor there. The actual game itself, though, was actually in production over at Cliffhanger, and they were actually a studio under EA. They're a relatively new studio. They've only existed for like 3 years or something like that, and their big project that they were working on was going to be a big Black Panther game. Now, this isn't actually just a team of rookies either. There's some high-end talent that actually came here, and this is actually kind of something that we're seeing a lot in the industry right now, which is ex-devs from other studios that have either been closed or laid off going and making their own studio and working like that. And so the guys who were making Cliffhanger, some of these guys, and I think including the team lead who did this game, was actually the guys who did Monolith Studios. Now, you might know Monolith as the guys who did the, what was it called again? What was that series bloody called again? Shadow of something or other? Shadow of Mordor? Shadow of War? Just had
I
Shadow
think
of
it's
abbreviation.
Shadow. I honestly want to say Shadow of Mordor myself.
Honestly, it was like Shadow of Mordor, Shadow of War, and then they just abbreviated to like the Shadow of series, which,
Yeah.
whatever. So yeah, they're the guys who did that. You might know that game from the big frickin' Nemesis system that came from those games. That's kind of went gangbusters, and then went copyrighted, and then went into the bank vaults of I think it was like I can't remember who actually did it. I think it was I can't remember who owned the guys who did Monolith. Well, they originally I think they got bought up by Embracer, I think. But I might be wrong there. I think it might just be a case of it got copyrighted and then thrown into the vaults of some producer or publisher whose name I cannot remember. It was some big publisher anyway. So yeah, that's never going to be seen for the next decade. But the guys who did Monolith, they came over and they made their own new studio. Some of the guys who did Monolith. Specifically, one of the fellows here who was, let me get his name here, in this article. Can't find it. Oh my goodness. Anyways, the guys who did Monolith came over, made the studio, and they were trying to make this Black Panther game actually based off of the Nemesis system, which is kind of why I've been going on about it for a while now. And they wanted to, obviously, they can't really use the original Nemesis system because it's copyrighted for at least another decade or so. But they were going to make it based on the Nemesis system. So what the shtick was is that you were going to be able to either play as, according to their words, as T'Challa, Killmonger, or Shuri. Shuri? I can't remember if I pronounced that right. All of which would be competing for the Black Panther role. Now, whichever one you picked, the others would become possibly rivals, and you kind of fight with them. There'd be the shape-shifting krill that are in there. Oh my goodness, what was it? Wakanda would also be in there as well, and people in Wakanda might be allies, might be Skrill, so you kind of have to figure it out, and they'd kind of be reacting to what you did. And there's that kind of nemesis system aspect to there as well. The people would be kind of reacting to it either as Skrill or as, actual citizens of, I'm guessing, Wakanda. And that's kind of how the game would
Drag
kind of
that
go
in.
from the conceptual level, right? That's kind of how they were working.
Yes.
There's a lot of places you can.
Interesting concepts. However, EA apparently did not agree, or at least they didn't agree recently, because when the studio got shut down, story goes, according to what is told to us by Bloomberg, who talked to these guys, this is news to even the guys at Cliffhanger. Because apparently, the actual game itself had recently passed what was called a gate. So basically EA's internal moniker for basically seeing if a project was worth going for or not. And apparently the EA executives just weren't happy with it still because it was just taking too long. The article I'm reading here is actually from Rock Paper Shotgun, who in their own words, some sources did say that EA executives were still frustrated that it hadn't left pre-production despite being in the works for 4 years. That slowness was apparently due to the fact that a lot of the now laid off staff were hired within the last year, even just the last few weeks or months. So maybe you're sitting here thinking EA made this problem and then they were unhappy when they had to deal with the
They
consequences of their actions, I
they
guess.
had to reap what they
Uh,
sow.
but yeah, and then it kind of goes on to, like I said, the game we're talking about here. And oh, here we go. Kevin Stevens was actually one of the guys leading Monolith. He was the, like I said, ex-guy who was doing the Shadow of series, who was again leading this game. So yeah, unfortunately, that kind of leaves us to where we are now. The studio itself, according to the article, now here's an actual number. It's actually only 2 years old, not 3. My mistake. But yeah, so here we are.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it goes on to the term, like I said before, of how it only recently passed the gate, which is how they kind of decide what goes forward and what goes not. But as we also covered, EA was still, I guess, supposedly unhappy with the fact they hadn't reaped their money yet. On the topic of money, it's funny that this article kind of mentions something else that's kind of funny at the very end, which is EA president and CEO, well, two different people. CEO Andrew Wilson, who everyone knows and hates collectively, and EA Entertainment president Laura Mile both took home 40 million last year. Just, as a side note,
Just a
these are the
small
people that are
margin about.
these are the people that are angry that they didn't get their pay yet.
Yeah.
I'm guessing that 40 million is individually, not collectively. So, that's just saying. But anyways, so yeah, that's kind of where we are in this whole thing. It's unfortunate. Like I said, the studio hasn't even been around for 2 years, and EA has already canned it because, well, they just didn't see their payoff faster than they wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yeah, the game's been in development for 4 years, but I mean, games in this industry nowadays that aren't COD or FIFA do take time. I know, shocking, EA. Games that take time. But, that's kind of where we are, unfortunately. What do you think about this whole thing, Justin?
Give me money. I want my money.
Yeah, this whole
I
thing does
want
kind of
my
stink of corporate
money.
greed, doesn't it? This whole thing does kind of stink of just corporate greed and just,
There's
impatient
only so
executives.
many people who do video games and stuff because they want to make a good video game, and because they want to make a good video game, they do so, and then they get a good following because of it. But there's also a lot of cases of just greed for greed.
Yeah, no, it's kind of funny, really. On a side note, actually, if I might, this actually kind of reminds me of an article or story I was actually listening to recently about the concept in the studio or the concept that's kind of been prevalent in some people nowadays. That is the idea of deprofessionalization in the games industry. To basically give you the Cliff Notes hanger of what is effectively a very long tirade. There are some people who are kind of disappointed, angry, not happy in the games industry right now about the fact that there's a lot of indie studios popping up all over the place, doing really good work and having small teams and stuff like that. And you might be thinking, what the heck is the problem with that? Well, let me explain. The big here is kind of in the name of the actual shtick itself, deprofessionalization. The idea here is that these small person teams are making big money and doing big projects and putting AAA to shame, and the big loss here is that it is going to basically hurt people in the middle management, jobs in marketing, jobs in management, people that are like 100,000 person teams. They're not getting enough, they're not benefiting off this because there's just not a lot of people in the team. So it's kind of the idea that it's deprofessionalization. It's all, the indie space nowadays that seems to be dominating. And that's a whole other tirade that I honestly should save for another video. Maybe we'll do it in the next week or two as a, rant video. But basically, yeah, the whole shtick here is that there's people who are unhappy in the games industry because they're small teams doing big work, and as a result, not a lot of people are benefiting off said big work. And I just kind of have to point to stuff like this and say this is the problem with professionalization. You have small teams, or, decent sized teams, doing really good work, and then the people in the middle are up on high saying, I needed the money yesterday, so you're fired.
I need my money today.
Honestly. There's the longest saying in the business industry, a dollar today isn't worth a dollar tomorrow. Unfortunately, dollars and cents are all some of these people even care for, so that's all they really think about. So, and here we are. So I don't know. I just feel like I could use this as kind of a retort point to the concept of the deprofessionalization trend, which I think is just all a bunch of bollocks anyway. But again, that's a tirade video for another day. I just thought I'd make a comparison there for you. Oh, again, look into that if you're more interested. It's an interesting little subcategory of the professional games industry. Or should I say professional games industry gripe. But anyways, that's kind of where we are for this week's video. It's unfortunate to see, like I said, studio's not even been around for 2 years. EA just kind of continues their trend of scoop up and screw up. Again, let us all give an exasperated sigh collective. Unsurprising. But yeah, that's where we are in this week. Hopefully better news will come in next week. Looking into some new possible works for videos. Like this title, or
So
this show's always been in work and production, so we'll see where it goes.
yeah, we just try as we go type of thing.
Hmm. Yeah, if you're not aware, we do this entirely off script, so there's no script we're reading from. This feels tirade-y, then
We just kind of go.
we just kind of go.
Yeah.
But anyways, I will finally let you all go. So have a good week, have a good night, unless Justin wants to give some endpoints. Maybe.
I will say the Black Panther game actually honestly would have been a pretty cool idea. It would have been fun. I would have liked to have seen such a thing because besides like some aspects of like the whole Wakanda being extremely overpowered but for some reason hidden the entire time, that concept being a little okay, that sounds a little cliche, but besides that, the whole idea was still good, especially if you go from the comics point of view. So, yeah, there's that. It would have been nice, but EA does what EA does best.
It's unfortunate because, like I said, we got the Blade game coming. I think Arcane or maybe another studio, which it's interesting to see. I mean, if it's a good game, then it's a good game. I just hope it's not just another, following the trend type thing. A good Blade game would be interesting, but again, I'd love play a Black Panther game. Like imagine the Wakanda we got in something like Marvel's Avengers, like that whole trash fire of a game, but actually just that's the whole shtick, explorable, and you get to go through that and you get to play as Black Panther, and there's a whole nemesis system in the background. That would be really fun to play with. And this whole story of like fighting for the position of Black Panther, that would have been a genuinely interesting thing. I've always liked the Black Panther shtick. And by the by, Justin, your concept of cliche. Remember, this is comics we're talking about. They invented the cliches.
Yes, but there's cliche good and then there's cliche bad.
Yeah, that is. I suppose that is true.
there's good cliche, which is like funny or ironic or hey, this is haha whatever, and then there's oh, you're just doing this for or like brownie points.
I don't know. I always found the idea of Wakanda kind of interesting, but that's just me. Anyways, have a good week, have a good night, and see you all next week, everybody. Bye bye.